You picked up your phone this morning and checked the calorie count on a granola bar before eating it, didn't you? You looked at the front label, saw the word healthy, maybe glanced at the calories and put it in your cart or your mouth without turning it over. That habit, the one you've done 1,000 times, is quietly one of the reasons the number on your bathroom scale hasn't moved in 3 years. And here's the part that stings a little. The fitness industry, the one selling you $180 a month gym memberships and $60 tubs of protein powder, has convinced you that staying lean after 50 requires more supplements, more cardio, more suffering. That's the villain in this video, not you, not your metabolism. The idea that you need more stuff to fix this. Because here's what nobody tells you. Walk through any night market in Taipei, any wet market in Osaka, any noodle shop in a small town outside Bangkok, and you'll see men in their 60s and 70s who are lean, not skinny fat, not soft around the middle, actually lean, and they never set foot in a gym that charges membership fees. They didn't do keto, they didn't do intermittent fasting apps, they did something older and cheaper, something that predates the whole industry that's been taking your money. And tonight, before you go to bed, you can start doing a version of it yourself for free, using stuff already in your kitchen. Let's get into why this actually works. Because Asian men eat rice and stay lean is the lazy version of this story, and it's mostly wrong. Rice isn't the secret. In fact, plenty of the leanest older men in these countries eat more rice per meal than the average American eats bread in a week. The real secret is boring, and that's exactly why it got buried under decades of supplement marketing. The first piece is portion architecture, not restriction. In traditional East and Southeast Asian eating, especially the pattern still practiced by older generations in places like Okinawa, Japan, meals are built around a principle sometimes translated as eat until you are 8 parts full. It's called hara hachi bu. This isn't some ancient monk's secret locked in a temple. It's documented by Dan Buettner's Blue Zones research, the same project that studied Okinawa as one of the longest living, leanest aging populations on Earth. Buettner's team found that Okinawan elders historically consumed meaningfully fewer daily calories than the average American diet, while still eating regularly, still eating rice, still eating pork on occasion. The difference wasn't the food group, it was the stopping point. Think about your own dinner plate last night. If you're like most men over 55 in the US, you probably ate until you felt done, maybe a little uncomfortable. Maybe you finished because the plate was full and it felt wasteful not to. That fullness signal you were chasing, the stuffed feeling, takes your stomach roughly 20 minutes to properly register in your brain. 20 minutes. Most Western meals get eaten in under 12. You're done eating before your body even knows how much you ate. That gap, that 8 to 20 minute window, is where the extra 300 to 500 calories a day sneak in, and over a year that's the difference between 15,000 and 25,000 stored calories, which is roughly 4 to 7 pounds of fat every single year just from finishing fast. The old world method isn't a diet plan, it's a pacing habit. Older men eating the traditional way in a lot of Asian households use smaller individual bowls instead of one big dinner plate. They use chopsticks instead of forks, and both of those things force the meal to last longer physically. A fork lets you shovel. Chopsticks, especially with rice, force smaller bites and more chewing per bite. This isn't a cultural stereotype. It's simple mechanics. You can test this tonight with your own dinner. Eat with chopsticks, even clumsily, even if you've never used them, and time how long your meal takes. Most people find it takes 8 to 12 minutes longer for the same amount of food, and they naturally stop earlier because the fullness catches up before the plate's empty. Here's the second piece, and this one's even less talked about: soup or broth before the main food. Walk into almost any traditional meal across Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and there's a small bowl of broth, miso soup, or a light soup course that comes first or alongside. A 1999 study out of Pennsylvania State University, led by researcher Barbara Rolls, tested exactly this mechanism not on Asian populations specifically, but on general adult subjects, and found that people who ate a low-calorie soup before a meal ate around 20% fewer total calories in that meal compared to those who didn't. 20%? That's not a rounding error. If your typical dinner is 800 calories, that's a 160-calorie reduction without cutting a single ingredient. just by adding an 80-calorie bowl of broth first. The mechanism is simple and it's not magic. Liquid volume in the stomach triggers stretch receptors that signal partial fullness faster than solid food does, especially warm liquid, because warmth also slightly slows the rate at which you eat what comes next. You physically cannot shovel food into your mouth at the same speed after a hot bowl of soup. Try it. Tonight, before dinner, heat up a cup of low-sodium broth, chicken, beef, even a bouillon cube, dissolved in hot water costs you about 12 cents, and drink it slowly 5 minutes before you sit down to eat. That's the entire step. No app, no subscription. Now let's talk about the protein piece, because this is where people get it backwards. Older men in traditional Asian eating patterns don't eat less protein, they eat protein more consistently, and it's usually fish, tofu, or smaller portions of pork and beef distributed across the day instead of one giant 12-ounce steak at dinner. A retired dock worker in a fishing town in Japan, eating grilled mackerel and a small piece of tofu with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, is getting protein spread across 3 windows instead of slammed into one meal. That matters because muscle protein synthesis, the process your body uses to actually hold onto lean tissue as you age, works best in doses of roughly 25 to 35 grams, spread every 4 to 5 hours, according to research summarized by exercise physiologists like Stuart Phillips at McMaster University, who has published extensively on aging muscle and protein timing. Eat 60 grams of protein in one sitting at 7 p.m. and skip it the rest of the day, and your body wastes a chunk of that dose. Spread it into 3 smaller 25 to 30 gram servings, and you preserve more muscle, and muscle is the tissue that burns calories even while you're sitting on the couch watching the news. A 3-ounce piece of grilled fish is about 21 grams of protein. A block of tofu, roughly half a standard package, is about 20 grams. An egg is 6 grams. This is not expensive. A whole fish at a grocery store fish counter runs $6 to $9 and can feed 2 meals. A package of firm tofu is $2 to $3 and gives you 4 servings. Compare that to a $65 tub of whey protein that lasts 3 weeks if you're using it daily. The old method isn't just biologically smarter, it's financially smarter, and that's exactly why an industry that profits from your monthly subscription never wanted you looking at fish counters and tofu blocks as the answer. Let's talk about movement now, because this is where the myth really falls apart. You've probably pictured older Asian men doing Tai Chi in a park at 6 a.m. and assumed that's the secret. Tai Chi is real, it's documented. There's actual research from Tufts University and Emory studying Tai Chi's effects on balance and fall prevention in older adults. But slow-motion arm movements in a park are not why these men stay lean. The bigger factor is unglamorous daily movement volume. What researchers sometimes call neat, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's the walking to the market instead of driving. The standing while cooking 3 meals a day instead of microwaving 1. The squatting down to sit on a low stool instead of a raised chair, which repeatedly loads the legs dozens of times a day without ever calling it exercise. A study published in the journal Science back in 1999 by James Levine at the Mayo Clinic found that NEAT could account for up to 2,000 calories of difference per day between individuals of similar size, just based on how much incidental movement they did without structured exercise. 2,000 calories is an entire extra day's worth of eating, burned or not burned, purely based on fidgeting, walking, standing, and daily physical tasks. An older man walking 25 minutes to a market twice a day, standing to cook and squatting to garden, is burning meaningfully more than a man who drives everywhere and sits in a recliner, even if that second man goes to the gym for 45 minutes 3 times a week and feels like he's done his exercise for the day. Here's your practical version of this tonight and tomorrow. You don't need a gym. You need to break your sitting into smaller chunks. Every time you get up to refill water, or check the mail, or take something out of the oven, that's not wasted movement. That's medicine, and doing it 15 to 20 times a day adds up to hundreds of calories your body wasn't expecting to burn. Park at the far end of the grocery store lot. Take 1 flight of stairs instead of the elevator if you're able to, and your doctor hasn't told you otherwise. None of this replaces real structured exercise, and if you have joint issues, heart conditions, or mobility limitations, talk to a doctor before changing your activity level. But the point stands. The lean older man in the market isn't secretly doing burpees. He's just never stopped moving in small ways all day long. Now here's the mistake almost everyone makes when they hear this and try to copy it. They hear eat until 80% full, and they turn it into a strict calorie counting exercise, weighing food, tracking macros in an app, turning a simple pacing habit into another stressful system, and within 3 weeks they burn out and quit, same as every diet before it. That's not the method. The traditional version has no numbers attached at all. It's a feeling, a pause halfway through the meal where you ask, am I actually still hungry, or am I just still eating because there's still food in front of me? That pause is the entire technique, no tracking required. The second mistake is skipping the broth or soup step because it feels like extra work for a meal. People think, I don't have time to make soup before dinner every night. But this isn't restaurant-quality miso from scratch. It's a mug of hot water with a stock cube, or leftover broth from last night's cooking, or even just plain hot water with a pinch of salt and pepper, taking 2 minutes to prepare. The goal is warm liquid volume before food, not a Michelin star course. The third mistake, and this one's sneaky, is that people assume this pattern means eating tiny portions of bland food forever, so they associate lean Asian eating with deprivation and give up before starting. That's backwards. Traditional meals in these cultures are often rich in flavor: garlic, ginger, fermented sauces, chili, sesame oil, because bold flavor with a smaller portion satisfies the palate faster than a bland, huge portion does. A small bowl of intensely flavored food can feel more satisfying than a bland, oversized plate. And that's not a coincidence. That's flavor intensity doing some of the fullness work that volume used to do in a Western-style meal. So why did this all get forgotten, or more accurately, why did it get buried? Because none of this sells anything. There's no proprietary formula in a bowl of miso soup. There's no monthly recurring charge for eating with smaller bowls. There's no influencer partnership deal for pausing halfway through dinner to check if you're still hungry. The entire wellness and supplement industry, and to be fair, gyms and trainers need to make a living too. But the marketing machine around them runs on convincing you that the solution is complicated, proprietary, and purchasable. A 3 block of tofu and a pause in your eating pace doesn't fit into a business model, so it got quietly pushed out of the conversation in favor of $89 fat burners with ingredients you can't pronounce and thermogenic pre-workouts that mostly just give you caffeine you could have gotten from a $4 bag of coffee. There's a documented example of this pattern shift too. Researchers studying Japanese migration to the United States and Hawaii found something striking, and it's referenced in multiple nutrition and public health studies going back decades. Japanese immigrants who kept traditional eating patterns after moving stayed leaner on average than those who fully adopted a Western diet within a generation or two, even living in the same country, same access to healthcare, same general lifestyle otherwise. The food environment changed, portion sizes changed, meal pacing changed, and body composition changed with it, not because their genetics changed in 2 generations. Genetics don't move that fast, but because the eating pattern did. That's about as close to a real-world controlled experiment as you get outside a lab, and it points at the same conclusion. It's not ancestry, it's habit. Now let's build this into something you can actually use starting tonight, step by step, because information without a routine just becomes another video you watched and forgot by Thursday. Step 1 tonight at dinner before you eat anything, drink 8 ounces of warm liquid, broth, bouillon, even plain hot water with a little salt if that's all you have. Wait 5 minutes, this costs you basically nothing, and takes 5 minutes you're probably spending waiting for food to finish cooking anyway. Step 2. Switch your dinner plate for a smaller bowl if you have one, or physically put less food on the plate than you normally would, about 80% of your usual portion, and eat slower, ideally with chopsticks, or if you don't have them, just switch your fork to your non-dominant hand. It sounds silly. It works because it physically slows your bite speed by 20 to 30%, according to basic pacing studies on utensil switching and eating speed. Step 3. Halfway through the meal, put your utensil down for 60 seconds and ask yourself the honest question. Am I still hungry, or am I just still eating? This is the entire Hara-Hachibu method distilled into one pause. It takes 1 minute. Do this every meal for 2 weeks and pay attention to how often the answer is, actually I'm good. Step 4. Spread your protein. Instead of one big protein-heavy dinner, aim for a source of protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even small ones. An egg or a scoop of cottage cheese in the morning, a can of tuna or a handful of edamame at lunch, fish or tofu or a modest portion of meat at dinner. 3 smaller protein hits instead of one giant one. Step 5. Add 10 minutes of walking after your largest meal of the day. Research on post-meal walking, including small trials looking at blood sugar response, has shown that even a 10 to 15-minute walk after eating can measurably blunt the blood sugar spike from that meal, which over time matters for fat storage, particularly around the midsection. You don't need a treadmill. A walk around the block or even pacing around your living room during commercials counts. Step 6. And this is the one people skip because it feels too passive. Build more standing and walking into chores you already do. Wash dishes by hand instead of loading the dishwasher one night this week. Walk to the mailbox instead of checking from the porch. Stand while you're on a phone call instead of sitting. None of this is exercise in the gym sense, but remember that Mayo Clinic research up to 2,000 calories a day difference just from incidental movement. Small stuff repeated dozens of times a day is not small in total. None of these 6 steps require a purchase. None of them require a gym membership, an app subscription, or a supplement. That's the point. And that's also exactly why you've never seen this package together before, because there's no margin in telling you to drink hot water and pause during dinner. Now, because I know some of you are going to want this laid out in a way you can actually stick on the fridge, instead of trying to remember 6 steps from a YouTube video 3 days from now, I put together a simple one-page printable that lays out this whole routine, the eating pace method, the protein spacing chart with exact gram counts for common foods, the post-meal walk reminder, and a 30-day tracker where you just check a box instead of counting calories. It's not a diet plan with recipes you'll never make. It's the checklist version of exactly what we just went through, and it's linked below if you want the printable version instead of trying to remember all 6 steps. Let's go a little deeper on why the pacing piece works so much better than people expect, because I think this is the part most viewers will actually feel in their own body within the first week. Ghrelin, the hormone that makes you feel hungry, and leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, don't communicate with your brain instantly. There's a documented lag, and while exact timing varies person to person, the commonly cited range from feeding behavior research is somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes for satiety signals to meaningfully register after food starts hitting your stomach. If your average meal takes 10 minutes, you are, by definition, always eating past the point where your body has enough information to tell you to stop. You're driving blind for the back half of every meal. Slowing down isn't a moral choice or a discipline flex. It's giving your own internal system enough time to actually finish its calculation before you order the second helping. This is also why so many older men say, "My metabolism just slowed down," as the explanation for weight gain after 50, and while there is a real modest decline in resting metabolic rate with age, research on this, including data reviewed in a large 2021 study published in the journal Science, looking at metabolism across the human lifespan, involving over 6,600 subjects, actually found that metabolism is fairly stable from age 20 to 60 and only starts declining more noticeably after 60, and even then at a slower rate than most people assume. The popular idea that your metabolism tanks the day you turn 40 doesn't hold up well against that data. What usually changes at 40, 50, 60 is muscle mass declining from inactivity and eating pace and portion habits staying exactly the same as they were at 25, when your body could tolerate the overflow more easily. It's not that your engine broke. It's that the fuel line never adjusted to a smaller engine doing less daily labor. That's actually the most important reframe in this whole video. You're not fighting a broken metabolism. You're fighting a mismatch between eating habits built at 25 and a body that's now 55, 60, 65, and quietly changed its actual needs without sending you a memo. The lean older man at the market isn't beating some genetic advantage. He's just never let the mismatch build up in the first place, because his eating pace, portion size, and daily movement were baked into ordinary life, instead of treated as a separate project you do for 45 minutes and then stop thinking about. One more piece worth mentioning because it directly affects the belly fat that bothers most men watching this. Fermented foods, kimchi, miso, natto, pickled vegetables show up constantly in traditional East Asian meals, often in small side portions alongside the main dish. There's ongoing research into fermented foods and gut bacteria diversity, including work referenced by researchers at institutions like Stanford, where a 2021 study led by researcher Justin Sonnenberg's lab found that a diet higher in fermented foods was associated with increased microbiome diversity and reduced markers of inflammation over a 10-week trial period. This is still an evolving area of research, and I want to be careful not to oversell it. Gut health science is genuinely still developing, but the practical takeaway is simple and low risk. A small side of kimchi or plain sauerkraut, costing maybe 50 cents to $1 per serving, added alongside a meal you're already eating, is a low-cost way to potentially support digestion, and it also happens to add intense flavor to a smaller portion, circling back to that flavor satisfaction point from earlier. Let's talk about consistency, because I don't want to sell you a magic pause and broth trick that works for 4 days and then quietly disappears from your routine the way every other health tip does. The reason harahachibu survived for generations in Okinawa isn't because people had superhuman willpower. It's because it was built into the meal structure itself, not treated as a willpower test at every dinner. If you have to consciously remember and fight yourself at every single meal, you'll lose that fight eventually. Everyone does. The trick is changing the environment so the behavior happens automatically. Smaller bowls automatically limit portions without requiring willpower. Soup before the meal automatically slows the first 10 minutes without requiring willpower. Protein spread across 3 meals happens automatically once you've stocked your fridge that way once on a Sunday instead of deciding at every single meal. That's really the whole secret, if you want it in one sentence. It's not what these men are eating, it's the structure around how, when, and how fast they eat it, repeated so consistently for so many years that it stopped being a diet and just became what a normal day looks like. And that structure is copyable by anyone at any age, starting with your very next meal, for less money than a single protein shake. If you try the broth before dinner step tonight, or you switch to a smaller bowl, drop a comment and tell me what you noticed, whether you actually stopped earlier than usual, whether the chopsticks thing felt ridiculous, whatever happened, because I read these and it helps me know which of these steps is actually landing for people watching, instead of just sounding good in a video. In the next video, I want to get into the specific squat pattern that shows up in traditional daily life across a lot of these same cultures, the low stool, the ground sitting, the deep squat instead of a chair, because there's real research on hip and ankle mobility in populations that squat daily throughout life compared to populations that mostly sit in chairs. And it directly affects knee pain and balance as men get into their 60s and 70s, which is honestly a bigger quality of life issue for a lot of you than the fat loss piece we covered today. And again, if you want the printable version of everything from this video, the eating pace checklist, the protein gram chart, the 30-day tracker box you just check off instead of counting anything, it's linked below. It's built to be printed on one page and stuck to your fridge, and it's meant to save you from having to rewatch this video every time you forget step 4. Grab it, try the 6 steps this week, and I'll see you in the next one.